Okay, let's get started. Hi, everyone. Hope you're doing well. As always, welcome to Cafe Oleh. My name is Jay. I'm a volunteer with Nefesh B'Nefesh. I myself made Aliyah 14 and a half years ago. And here at Cafe Oleh, we try to go over Hebrew that we use in Israel every day, whether it's grocery shopping or paying bills, just everyday life, and more particularly the words that you as fellow Olim probably want to know, and for various reasons, one of which may be that you're at a beginner's level at Ulpan. Most of our participants here at a more beginner's level, or you're not taking Ulpan at all, you may not get to yet. And understanding that's frustrating to not know words that you need in everyday life, but still wanting to get ahead. So that's what we do here. And so we're very user-based, user-friendly. So we get lots of requests from you about topics to cover in these classes. And we're really happy to get any more that you have. If you have any specific ones in the course of this, feel free to email Nefesh B'Nefesh. In addition, if you don't know about this yet, although you should have gotten an email about it, Nefesh B'Nefesh is partnered with Ulpan Le'inyan, which is one of the Ulpanim that's more, that a lot of Olim really like, to do more conversation-based classes for the next few weeks, both at beginners and intermediate levels. This is a little bit more frontal than those are, owing to how many people are on the call and just the format and the lack of time that we have here. If you're looking to get more conversation, experience, practice, definitely sign up for them. There's another one this week on Wednesday, if I'm not mistaken. Nefesh B'Nefesh can provide more content information about that. So let's dive into it. So we got one of our requests to talk about how should we say this, introductory phrases and expressions, which is a really great one. And we've gotten similar requests in the past, which is essentially, Jay, how can I speak higher level Hebrew? How can I write a letter in Hebrew? How can I write an email in Hebrew? And I get all of that. And I am going to take you through some of the vocabulary with a big caveat, which is, number one, not everyone speaks like this in Hebrew, although there is such a thing as higher level Hebrew, and you're going to get a taste of it today. But number two, I want you to embrace the frustration that a lot of you are having of, you may be at a beginner's level, you may not even be able to put together a sentence. And I'm giving you these words, I'm going through these words with full knowledge that they may just sit by you, whether you write these down as we go through the vocab, whether you review it and watch the recording afterwards, whether you take a screenshot, whether you just have it in the background. Some of these words may be too advanced. And not that the word itself is advanced, it's just that you don't have the vocabulary to create a whole sentence to use them. That's fine. I just want to put these in your heads because you're not learning this language as a child. A child, whether it's their native language or a secondary or tertiary, has already a limited amount of vocabulary. You're all native English speakers, the vast majority of you native English speakers, one of the richest vocabularies out there, and you've all had at least some professional experience in life, so you know how to write a letter, a business letter. So owing to that juxtaposition, some of these words are going to be a little bit higher, some are going to be a little bit lower, but these are great ways to start a conversation, whether you're writing an email, whether you're talking to someone, and I've differentiated, as you'll see, between higher level and lower level. Okay. All right. So as always, I'm going to share my screen. If you have any questions, feel free to write them in the chat window. When I finish, I'll get to them. You're also welcome to take a screenshot. You'll also get a recording of the video. So if you didn't get all the words that are written out, by all means, you can go through them again. Okay. So let me pull that up. Share. Cooperative. Okay. There we go. All right. Let's make this full screen. Full screen. Okay, So we're going to start off with some fancy Hebrew. We've talked about this in the past, in the last few weeks, actually, when we talked about synonyms and how Hebrew has a much more concise, conservative vocabulary, but it still can be rich and it still can be upgraded. For example, we didn't even go into this. There's different verbs for to put and to take. We didn't even get to, because again, it's considered higher level Hebrew you don't use every day. But because we got this request, I think it's also really good that you know these expressions exist in Hebrew, and to at least recognize when they happen, if not, use them as well. So as always, Hebrew with nikud, with the vowelization is on the right-hand side. English friendly, American English friendly transliteration in the middle, English and notes. And we're going to go through each of these together. So let's start at the top. So at the top is a great way to start a sentence, right? Just like in English, using the word following. Following the events of the weekend, comma. Following your request for an appeal, comma. Following whatever it is, right? In English, it's a great way to start a sentence. In Hebrew, it is as well. It's just as high level. And we have two ways to say that. One is behemshech le, as you see here on the right-hand side. Behemshech le or be'ikvot. Now, there's a slight difference between the two. I translated these both as following. But there's a slight difference. Behemshech le. Behemshech really does mean following something. And the le I put there to indicate that it's almost always followed by a infinitive verb, a verb in the infinitive form, meaning to do something, or it's just followed by the prefix le. So following, you could even say, if you didn't want to use a verb, right? Let's say behemshech lepniyatcha. Really fancy Hebrew, following your request. Behemshech la, whatever it is, but behemshech is almost always followed by le. And the other way to say following is be'ikvot. Be'ikvot literally means in the wake of. But we can translate that reasonably enough into English as following. Okay, so if you see, you'll see, by the way, these words aren't just ones that I'm, encouraging to use. These are ones I scoured my emails, my WhatsApps, all my conversations to see what are the top ones I could pull out that I use on a regular basis or that I see on a regular basis. Behemshech and be'ikvot are really good. You'll see these in the news. You'll see these if you get a formal letter from anyone, whether it's a governmental ministry or legal reasons or whatever it is. This is the type of language they're using, so you can use it as well, at the very least recognize it. So behemshech le or be'ikvot, and it almost always begins a sentence. Great word to have, meaning following. Not following as in I'm following you on Facebook. This is following the events of blah, 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 okay? Another great word, behetem. Behetem means accordingly. So we had the other week about the verb lehitnaheg, which means to behave. And on Israel's version of Big Brother, that reality show that unfortunately is still around, when the hosts cut back to the house to see what's going on in the house, they implore the tenants as well as the audience all scream, "Na lehitnaheg behetem." Please behave accordingly. Okay, behetem, accordingly, is a great word to just have in your vocabulary to recognize. You can use it just like you would accordingly in any context you can think of. Okay. This is a great one as well. This one you're going to see a lot, again, in formal letters, in formal appeals. Those of you who want to know a little bit of Israel's legal world, remember that Israel has the largest per capita of lawyers in the world, so you would be hard remiss to not find a lawyer at some point here in Israel. But birtzoni le is a really great expression, and it's, again, formal Hebrew. You're not going to use this every day when you're talking to someone. Even if you're requesting something, you're not going to use this term, but it is a very nice high-level Hebrew that you should have and at least recognize when you get a letter that has this at the beginning of a sentence. Birtzoni followed by le, again, that prefix that is either at the front of an infinitive verb or something else, means I wish to. Not I wish like I wish for 10 million shekel. This is I wish to do something. I wish to inform you. I wish to request. I wish to whatever it is, okay? Birtzoni, that E at the end of biratzon indicates I'm talking about my wish. Okay, so if I wanted to conjugate that for someone else, I could. I'm not going to go through all of that. That's in dictionaries, and some of you haven't even learned suffix pronouns. But anyways, birtzoni le just means I wish to do something. I wish to do whatever it is, not as in I wish on a star. Okay? But this can be at the beginning of a sentence, beginning of a clause. It actually can follow behemshech or beikvot. Following your request for an extension, I wish to inform you that, right? Just like we talk like that in English, well, we don't really talk like that, but we write like that. You can do exactly the same in Hebrew. Birtzoni le is a really nice way to, I would like to tell you, or I would like to, or I wish to in this case. Really nice level, really nice Hebrew. Okay. The next word, lidiatra for man, or lidiatech. Lidiatra, lidiatech. This is the equivalent in Hebrew of FYI. For your information, for your knowledge, for your knowledge is really the best way to translate this in Hebrew, but it can also be for your information. Lidiatcha, if I'm speaking to a man. Lidiatech, if I'm speaking to a woman. And the beauty of Hebrew is that because we don't write nikud normally when you see anything printed, I only did it here to help you out, you'll just write this without the little dots and bars under the letters, and it will be gender inclusive, right? Lidiatcha, lidiatech, both mean for your information. Really nice way to say it. We don't have the equivalent of FYI as a abbreviation in Hebrew, and mainly that's because, as you see, it's one word. In Hebrew, lidiatcha is one word instead of 3 words in English for your information. So a great word to have as well in your repertoire. This next one's very important because if you're getting into a heated conversation with someone, regardless of what level you're at, we've talked about this for the last few weeks, is the issue of context and societal and cultural context that a dictionary can't always give you. And this is a great one. In kol hakavod. In kol hakavod means with all due respect. Kol hakavod, we've had this before, without the im at the beginning, just kol hakavod is both literally but also sarcastically like good job. Okay? But in kol hakavod, with all the honor, literally, but it translates to with all due respect. Now, just like in English, with all due respect doesn't often mean you're actually giving the person respect. You're saying that as deference to them in order to disagree. In Hebrew, almost, I would say at least 90% of the time, if you say in kol hakavod, you've already indicated you're not respecting the other person. It's very much a filler. So if you say in kol hakavod, you're looking to really like nail the person with your disagreement of their opinion. So when you use it, you're not actually giving the respect that you think you are in English. It's very much a filler. And this is also an important part that part of the request that we got was to translate a lot of phrases that in English sound fine, like I don't want to disturb you, but I don't want to offend, but in Hebrew, we don't do that because you can translate those, but in Israeli society, we're much more blunt and direct. All those jokes are very true. That I hate to say it, but it's true, that passive aggressiveness we have in at least American society that I know we don't have in Hebrew. So it's the same thing here. In kol hakavod, even though it sounds like you're being polite, you're really not. You're really about to lay into this person. So you want to use this carefully, because if you say in kol hakavod to someone, you're getting very heated in your disagreement of whatever they've said to you. Okay, it doesn't translate literally to with all due respect. That's a very important point. These next two things are great because, again, we are a society, we're a nation, we're a people who love to argue, if not disagree with each other. These are two great expressions to back that up with that, what I just talked about with in kol hakavod. Lav davka and lo be'achreach. Lav davka, you've probably heard a lot. Both of these you've probably heard a lot. Lav davka is actually Aramaic. Davka, many of you probably know that word. You've heard that word before. It means, we usually use it in modern Hebrew as especially, all the more so, now more than ever. All of that, like really emphasizing something, we use the word davka. Davka, it may sound like Yiddish to some of you. It is Aramaic. It is 100% Aramaic. And as a result, when we want to negate it, we have to use the Aramaic version of lo, which is lav. Okay, so in this case, lav davka is best translated as not quite or not necessarily. So if you want to disagree with someone, this is actually a polite way to say it. If you want to disagree with someone, you can say lav davka and then go into it, into why you disagree with them. This is actually much more polite than in kol hakavod. Okay, so lav davka is not quite or not necessarily. The next one, lo be'achreach, it's a little hard to say. I often say lo be'echrach, and I hear a lot of native Israelis say lo be'echrach or lo be'echrach, if you can't say Reish. Lo be'echreach is a little too much for people, but this is not necessarily. This is just straight up not necessarily. You'll see this as well. It is higher level Hebrew, so you'll see it in the news, in an interview. You'll see it in formal letters, but it's a nice way to disagree with someone. If someone says something and you can reply lo be'echreach, and then explain why you don't necessarily agree with them. Okay. This one I put in the formal. It's not really formal. We use this in everyday language, is bichlalo. Bichlalo means not at all. This is a great word. I use this quite a lot. This is a really useful day-to-day thing. Again, whether you're disagreeing with someone, whether you're, whatever it is, if you ever need to use the equivalent of not at all, this is where you're going to go. And bichlalo is great because you have, phonetically, you have some really good sounds in there to really emphasize it. If you really want to drive home the idea of not in the least or not at all, you can really exaggerate the sounds in this, right? Bichlalo. You're going to hear that a lot in everyday teenage talk. Bichlalo. It's really over the top, but it's really like absolutely not. Okay? Bichlalo, great way to say it. The more you exaggerate it, the more you're being emphatic about absolutely not about something. And here, this is a great one. This is a great one because this is actually very polite. And this is very good Hebrew to say something that in English we, I think, take for granted a lot, is the issue of time and time management. Because as we talked about before, Israel time runs differently than it does in other countries. It certainly runs different than the United States. It runs even a little different than Western Europe, even though we're a much more Eurocentric country. This, though, behekdem ha'efshari. Behekdem ha'efshari is as soon as possible. When you request someone to do something behekdem ha'efshari, or you promise to do something behekdem ha'efshari, this is not like American style, let's do lunch, or yeah, I'll get that to you soon. You are committing yourself to do something as soon as possible, and if you don't, you're going to have to explain why not. Okay, so that's why I specifically translated this as soon as possible and not ASAP. ASAP, first off, is a little bit more gruff, but also in abbreviating it, we almost forget what it means. And it becomes almost like right now, this is a polite way to say it. Behekdem ha'efshari. So as soon as possible, great thing to have under your belt. Whether you're saying it nicely, whether you're being more emphatic, but when you say this to someone or they say it to you, understand they really do mean, I need this as soon as possible. They're not just using it as a filler. And then the last one in our more nice words when we're conducting a conversation is ledati. Ledati is a really great way to frame whatever it is you're expressing as your opinion. Because ledati literally means to my opinion or according to my opinion. Okay, da'at is knowledge. De'ah, which comes from the same exact root, means opinion. Lida'ati is to my opinion, or in my opinion, in this case for English. It can also be translated as to my knowledge. It can even be translated as I think. But lida'ati personalizes whatever you're saying in a way that simply just literally saying, I think, ani choshev, doesn't make it as personal as lida'ati. So lidati is a really nice way, especially if, let's say, you're having a conversation and you're disagreeing with someone, or you're agreeing with them. If you really want to emphasize, this is something I personally hold dear, or I personally agree to, lidati is a great way to frame that. Here's a sample sentence. Lidati, ani choshev she'ata tzodek. In my opinion, I think you are correct. Okay? That's a nice way to say it. Instead of just saying, Ani choshev she'ata tzodek, I think you're right, which is perfectly all right, but ledati really emphasizes, I hold on to this. I believe this. It's a really much more emphatic way to say it. Okay, I separated out words that are still conversation words, and these are not as formal. Some of the ones we had up top, like bichlalo, aren't necessarily formal, but the following words that are in a yellow color are more everyday words. All of these words you'll encounter every day, but these are the words you'll actually speak, you'll hear. It's a little bit more conversational, if not casual. And with these come a lot of cultural context that I'm going to try to explain to you as best as possible. So this first one, tachlis. Tachlis, you've probably heard a lot. Tachlis sounds like Yiddish. It's not. It's the Ashkenazi pronunciation of the word tachlit. Tachlit or tachlis have to do with something concrete, like a concrete plan. But when we say tachlis in Hebrew, in modern Hebrew, in everyday life in English, in Israel rather, it is the equivalent of using the English expression of brass tacks. Like, let's get down to brass tacks. Tachlis bo nikba pgisha. Like, let's get down to brass tacks and let's schedule a meeting. That's what that means. Like, if you want to get down to actual stop the conversation about niceties or talking around a topic, you use tachlis to get into it. You can also use tachlis in another context, which is the one I like to use it a lot. And that has to do with this translation I have here of you said it. If someone says something to you and you want to agree to it, like, let's think of an example. I really think someone expresses an opinion, basically, and you want to agree with it, you can say tachlis. Especially if the person's getting really fired up about it. Like, the government really needs to expedite the number of vaccines being given out. And then you say tachlis, because you agree with them. Like, you said it. You add, like, brass tacks, you're right. Like, if we were really getting down to nitty gritty, you're absolutely right. Okay? Tachlis is a great thing to have to, as opposed to disagreeing with someone, is to agree with someone, which is the one context of it. And the other is, let's get this to a more practical level of what we need to do. or what needs to get done. This is conversational Hebrew only. You're not going to find this in a formal letter, which is why I changed the colors here, right? This is a great conversation piece, but this is not formal Hebrew. This is everyday, this is slang, in other words. Okay? This next word is similar in that it is regular Hebrew, but it has a more conversational meaning as well. So legamre. Legamre means absolutely, but it means absolutely just like absolutely does in American English, where it can be for real or it can be sarcastic. And it really depends on the context and how you say it. If someone says, let's think of an example. Wow, what kind of weather we're having right now. It's as if, it's as if we've never had winter, because right now it's very warm here in Israel, if you're not here in Israel right now. וואי, המזג האוויר עכשיו זה פשוט קיצי. It's really summary here. And then you reply, לגמרי. That's absolutely in its serious sense, in its literal sense. But if you want to be sarcastic, you could say, I can't think of something sarcastic off the top of my head, but basically you understand what I'm saying. In terms of the English, same thing as in Hebrew. If you want to say something, oh, absolutely, like that, legamre. Again, just like bichlalo, you really want to emphasize sarcasm by drawing out the syllables. It's usually the middle syllable. So like here, legamre is absolutely. Legamre is absolutely in a sarcastic sense. Okay? So the more you stretch out, the more you exaggerate, and thus the more sarcastic you are. Here's another one that does the exact same thing. Mamash. Mamash literally means, we use it to mean totally, a lot, can also mean absolutely, but it also can mean that in a sarcastic sense. So it also can mean very. So, ata mamash maksim, you are very enchanting, is the serious way to say that. And someone says, here's the sarcastic weather reference, right? It's 24 degrees today here in Tel Aviv. Wow, this is some winter we're having, right? Mamash. That's how you would use it as a sarcastic way, right? Oh, this is some winter we're having. It's 24 degrees outside. Mamash. Okay, so totally in a sarcastic sense. You really want to over-exaggerate how you speak. These are still really good ways, especially if you can't fully articulate yourself in Hebrew. The context to know when sarcasm is used and to be able to exaggerate, like I just explained to you, really helps fill in those awkward points that you would otherwise feel comfortable sharing in English. Even if you're not good at sarcasm in English, I've just taught you basically how to master it with these few words in Hebrew. Okay? And now this one. This one is a great one because this is very much in a conversation. This one, I would love to see an Ulpan teacher teach this because this I've only learned on the ground. And this was a hard one to learn, but I think I've mastered how to define it for you, is zeu. Zeu simply means that's it. Literally, it means this is it or that's it. If you were to use this in any other context, that would be it. It's an abbreviation for zehu. Okay, so this is it, that's it. But when you use zeu at the beginning of a sentence, and you have to listen to what I'm going to say. Let's say you're having a conversation with a colleague in your office, right? And the colleague is asking why you didn't do a certain task. And you're trying to explain to them, I didn't do the task because I didn't receive the email about it until very late. So the person is going to ask you, I see that you didn't do this task. And before they can finish saying that why you didn't, or they're just pointing out in a very passive way, I see you didn't do this. It's not so passive, but it's not blaming you yet. And you would reply, זהו, רק קיבלתי את המייל עכשיו. זהו, when you use it at the beginning of a sentence and then you hurriedly speak next about what the thing is a way to deflect or justify doing something or not doing something, right? So someone points out, I see that you didn't finish that task. That was in an email, that was in your Slack, that was in your Monday.com, whatever your task manager is, and you want to give a reason, whether it's justifiable or not, that you didn't do it. And you're going to start that conversation or that sentence with zeu, but you're not going to say zeu. You're going to say it like this. זהו, רק קיבלתי אני רואה שרק קיבלתי את המייל עכשיו. Even if you didn't understand everything that I just said after זהו, by the way I said זהו, I understand, and the listener understands, I'm trying to deflect blame. I'm trying to deflect doing something or not doing something, or justify doing it. It's another really good way to engage in a conversation, but also to be able to read the other person in the conversation. If they use zeu, for example, here's one that I'm sure is applicable to, unfortunately, many of us. You hire an installator, a plumber, someone to come in to fix something in your house, right? And they're 2 hours late. No explanation. And you call them out on it and you say, זהו, איחרת, לא? Wait a minute, you were late here, right? כן, זהו, היו פקקים בדרך. Yeah, there were some delays, there was some traffic on the way here. Okay, when I use zeu, I'm showing, whether I use it or the person speaking to you uses it, they're trying to quickly, they're trying to show a little bit of blame on their side, and they're trying to quickly change the subject. So this is a really good way, if you're having a conversation, both whether you are or the person who's talking, to get some visuals, some context clues that something's not quite right there. And if you need to dig a little bit more, this is a place to do it when zeu is used in this very hurriedly way, right? So we talked about over-exaggerating, like with bichlalo and legamre and mamash. When you say, זהו, היו כמה פקקים בדרך. Yeah, there was some delay, there was some traffic on the way here. You know something is there. It's context that the dictionary is not going to be able to teach you, and until you're immersed in a Hebrew speaking environment, you're not going to get it. Okay, so I only gave you a little bit because I wanted these to sink in with you, and I want you to practice these, whether you're taking the old Parley and Yan class, whether you have the chance to practice with each other. These are some great vocabularies to have under your belt. And again, if you didn't take a screenshot, you're going to get a recording of this, and you can go over these as much as possible. You can also, old school pen and paper, write these out. So I see we have a whole lot of questions. I want to stop here to go through some of them and then take some more as they come up. Okay. Michelle asks, how do you say following our conversation from yesterday? So great point, right? We go back to that first one we had. So if it was a fancy sentence, בהמשך לשיחתנו, בהמשך ל, right? Following, and it's followed by le. שיחתנו. שיחתנו is השיחה שלנו. שיחה is a conversation. שלנו is ours. The fancier you get in Hebrew, the more concise your words are. And sichatenu is our conversation. We take the pronoun suffix our and we attach it to the noun that we're referring to, that we're modifying. So behemshech lesichatenu me'etmol, following our conversation from yesterday. It's very fancy Hebrew. Again, I'm not writing this out because unless you can follow that up with a equally formal sentence, it's not worth repeating. It's worth recognizing for sure, because you're going to get emails, letters, news bits that are going to have that exact construct in it. But it's good for you to recognize. I don't know if all of you have the vocab yet to get to how you would continue that sentence with the appropriate clause. But behemshech lesichatenu is following our conversation. Great thing to have when you can get there and really flesh out that thought in Hebrew. Richard asks, in my humble opinion, we don't say that in Hebrew. Humility, there is a word for humility in Hebrew. We don't, that's not a cultural term. That's not a cultural modality that we have, right? We don't humble ourselves with our opinion in Hebrew, in Israeli society. If we have an opinion, we want it to be heard. So you would never you would never translate literally, in my humble opinion. You would just say lidati, and you would emphasize, you would show a little bit of humility by how you say it, right? You go up a little at the end. Lidati, you show a little bit of hesitancy to say it. Lidati, ani choshev she. Or another way to show humility without saying it, because you're not going to say it. Lidati is one way. You'll follow up lidati, or you'll express an opinion, and this one I will write in the group chat window, with the verb lithot. Lithot. Lithot means to wonder. W-O-N-D-E-R. Right? So just like you can say in English, I wonder if, when you express an opinion with I wonder if, it's very much, those of you who are educators in the audience, it's that teacher talk of you're trying to lead the conversation. To say, I wonder if something, you're trying to lead the other person into that conversation to agree with you. But it's also a way to humble your opinion. So either way, lidati or lidati ani tohe im, I wonder if, and then keep going with that, right? So really nice way to show humility, because again, you're not going to say that, in my humble opinion, you're not going to say that in Hebrew. Okay, let me just pull that back up. Chaim asks, is there a difference between lidati and lefi dati? Great question. Lefi means according to. So lidati means in my opinion, or to my knowledge. Lefi dati is you're being a little bit more emphatic, what you're saying, according to my opinion. So it's a little bit more emphatic, it's a little bit more confident, perhaps bordering on arrogance in saying that, but lidati is more than enough to emphasize it's your opinion. Okay? The great question. Ron asks, what's brass tacks? I thought that was a normal American English expression. Maybe it's just American English. Brass tacks, the tacks that you hammer into the carpet. And the idea is that let's get down to business. Let's get down to brass tacks. Brass tacks mean let's get down to business. So tachlis, when you say tachlis in that context, it means let's get down to business. Or the nitty gritty, as someone else wrote, the bottom line. All great translations for it. Bruce, great thing you brought up. So when you use this term zeu, like I explained, to try to deflect, and let's say you want to agree with someone who calls you out on something, you can also use the word bidiuk. Bidiuk means exactly, right? Just like you would say in English. If someone calls you out, says, I see you haven't done that task, and like, you're exactly right, blah, 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 blah. And the blah, blah, blah is your explanation. The bidiuk is absolutely all right for that. Let me just write that in the chat window. Bidiuk. Bidiuk means exactly or exact, but in this case, it's that same idea of let's try to deflect while giving a little bit of credence to your complaints. Okay. Right. So Nathan asks, I hear Zo often at a store, bakery, deli, etc., asking if that's all for my order. You're absolutely right. Zo is a very common expression because it literally means, is that it? Or that's it? Or is this it? Or this is it? Right? It is used in so many different contexts. The one I'm showing you here is particularly about how you're trying to deflect or justify something to do, but Zo literally means also, is that it or that's it? Again, it really depends on the context you're in. It can mean, as you already heard, 5 different things at least. But it's a very important point. You'll hear that a lot, especially if you're ordering something, by the way, because they want you to keep ordering. So they'll ask, is that it? Michelle asks, can Zell be a funny way to say the end? Yes, that's a great point. You're absolutely right. You can say, that's it, right? Just like you would in English, Zell. Let's say you go on some rant about your opinion on something, and at the end, you take an exasperated breath and you go, ha, Zell. Like you've exhausted yourself, that's it for now at least. It's definitely a funny way to say the end. Okay. In Ulpana Kiva, in year 2000, we always had to say Lefi Dati. Lefi Dati, Mili, like I said, is very, we don't speak like that. Lefi Dati is confidence bordering on arrogance. According to my opinion, blah, 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 which could be the context in which someone is talking. But if you're just explaining your opinion or sharing your opinion, Ledati is more than sufficient. Okay. Okay. Any other questions about the words that we've gone through today or any of the expressions? Okay. Yes. Oh, here's someone's microphone go on. Any questions about anything else now? I open up the chat to any questions you have about any other topic that we didn't go through today. Yes.
Actually, from last week, I was watching Eretz Nehederet, and the MC said something like, "Bo nigmor et ze." And I was kind of shocked in light of what you said last week.
That's a good point. Bo nigmor et ze. They are, I don't know the context of it. For those of you who don't know, by the way, Eretz Nehederet is the long-standing satire show in Israel. It's the equivalent of Saturday Night Live plus The Daily Show. It's on Channel 12. It's run now, I think it's in its 18th or 19th season. It's really biting, classic Jewish satire about Israel and the world. Highly recommend it. Even if you can't follow along, it's worth watching at least because everyone talks about it. Bo nigmor et ze is a expression that because you just say Bo nigmor et ze, people have that in their repertoire. So they'll use that without the connotation that I talked about last week. Although maybe based on the skit, they are trying to infer something sexual there. But Bo nigmor et ze is just easier to say aesthetically than Bo nesayem et ze. Bo nesayem et ze is very formal. Bo nigmor et ze, because of all those o vowels, it's just easier to say and to get out really fast. So that's, even if they had nothing sexual, that's probably the reason why they used it. Right? But that's a really good, so this is a great question that comes up.
Jay, coming back to my humble opinion, so you would never say Lefi dati oniya?
Never, never.
Thank you.
Never.
But I've heard Lefi aniyut dati.
You will not hear that in everyday Hebrew. Again, we're talking everyday, walk out onto the street here in Tel Aviv, Hebrew, you will never hear someone calling their opinion humble. I 99% guarantee you that is not in everyday conversation, meeting a random person on the street, for sure not.
Thanks for the
So
warning.
I'm trying to take you away from that. If you've heard it, great. That's not everyday Hebrew.
So basically, you're saying that my humble opinion is an oxymoron for Israelis.
I'm saying it's a very, I'm not saying that Israelis can't be humble. You can certainly be humble. It's just that that expression that we have in English, both in British English and American English and other forms of English, it doesn't work here. In my humble opinion, they'll show humility by how they express their opinion, but they won't preface it by saying that. It just doesn't, yeah.
No worries. Thank you.
You're welcome. Someone asked what time Eretz Nederet is on. I totally forget, but you can watch all of the episodes, not just this season, but all seasons. I'm putting the link in the chat. We've gone through this website before, Mako. It's the news website that's attached to Channel 12. When we did our thing on media literacy, that is the website where you can find all the shows that are on Channel 12, including Eretz Nederet. Okay. Halachic discussions, again, is not everyday Hebrew in Israel. It's not. So again, in my humble opinion, let's put that all aside, folks. We don't talk like that. Other questions? This can be about anything. It doesn't have to be about the words we talked about today. Any questions you have about Hebrew or how to use Hebrew?
How would you say pick that up, as in somebody threw something on the ground?
Great question. So this one, you're actually going to be passive aggressive. And this is a great one to have. This one, you're going to say, you dropped something. And this is what I use. This is what I hear other people use. I'm going to write it in the chat window, both in Hebrew and in transliteration. Write it politely. Sorry. I'm actually going to write two different ways you can say this. Okay, this is one way. And the other way is okay. We have two ways to say you dropped something.
That up again. It was very fast.
I'm sorry?
Can you please put that up again? It was too fast to copy.
It's in the chat window. It hasn't gone anywhere. It's in the chat window. Okay? Let me explain. So we have two ways to say you dropped something. And again, just like in other countries, this needs to be said. You need to know when it's appropriate to call someone out on this and not to call someone out on this. If it's a place where you don't feel safe, it's probably best not to call someone out on this. If it's a place where you do feel safe to do so, it's your prerogative. But just like you wouldn't necessarily say it to a complete random stranger without a threat of violence being there, same thing applies in Israel, unfortunately. Okay, so you have two ways to say it. Slicha nafal lach, to a woman, or slicha nafal lecha. And you'll see it, you'll hear, you won't, slicha I put in there to be polite. Slicha means excuse me. Nafal lach, something fell. Nafal is the verb for something fell. It fell. And that's the object that you're referring to. Lach or lecha is referring to whom you're speaking. So if you're speaking to a woman, you would say lach. Speaking to a man, lecha. and you would just point at the thing and say, you dropped something, right? But it doesn't really mean you dropped something. Something dropped out of your pocket is more the is what you're saying here. And it is rather passive aggressive to say, looks like something fell out of your pocket there. Okay, that's one way to say it. Or to be a little bit more direct, slicha, again saying, excuse me, shachacht to a woman, or shachachta. Whoa, sorry. People are chatting as I'm trying to go through this and show it. Just 1 second. Okay, so back in the chat window, let me just open this at least for myself. Slicha, shachacht for a woman, or shachachta for a man, mashu, something. Excuse me, you forgot something. Okay? Both of those ways are ways to say in a very aggressive way. It's not super aggressive, but it's pretty aggressive to say you dropped something. This could be you dropped a piece of litter, or your cigarette butt, your whatever it is that you're pointing out to someone. Both of these can also be used politely, right? Like someone accidentally forgets their bag, or their cell phone, or a personal item. You can still use these. But if you're trying to say you dropped something, as in you dropped a piece of litter, you'll also use these. And again, it's in your tone. It's how you say it that conveys you dropped something.
How would you say to a child to pick up garbage that he probably dropped intentionally, such as an empty bag of potato chips or candy wrappers, please?
That's a good question. I don't have the answer for that. Let's ask a parent and get back to you on that. I just don't have enough personal experience babysitting or parenting. It's a great question. Okay, I have a bunch more questions. Michelle asks, I heard that the Ayin and the Aleph and Tet and Taf used to have different sounds. Do you know what those were? I do know what they are. We can go through those at a different time. Just know that in modern Hebrew, Ayin and Aleph, Tet and Taf all sound like one another. The only difference in pronunciation, not in spelling, is two ways. First off, if a Jew who is from a Arabic-speaking country that either made Aliyah or grew up in an Arabic-speaking environment will make a difference between Ayin and Aleph. Ayin will sound like Ayin in Arabic, Ayin, and Aleph will sound like Aleph and Ayin in modern Hebrew. And oftentimes when Mizrahim, when Jews from Middle Eastern countries want to overemphasize whether or not they grew up in those countries or not, to emphasize something as well as their identity, they'll use Ayin, because it's a very, as you hear, it's a very emphatic sound. Tet and Taf don't have a difference in modern Hebrew. The only exception to that is if you're trying to transliterate into Hebrew the sound TH, tha, you will use a Taf with a dagesh, with a gerish, with an apostrophe. So if you're trying to write the sound tha in Hebrew, it's Taf apostrophe. Okay? Rona asks, I needed to write to an Israeli office to request records from the early 90s. I consider that a big request. How do I respectfully request? How do I address the person? How do I thank them? Okay, you need a whole lot of stuff here, but you're going to start that sentence, that request, with that line that we had here before. Biltzuni. Biltzuni, in your case, you're going to ask, I request. I wish to receive, or I wish to request. So Biltzuni lehasig, I request to get, or Biltzuni lebakesh, I wish to request. Either of which are very formal ways to request something, to begin a request. If you are showing deference to someone, like at the beginning of a sentence, of a letter, right? Like, dear so-and-so. You have a couple different ways to say that. If you know the person's name, you can say, I'm going to write this in the chat window. If you know the person's name and you know their, let's say their last name, let's say if it's a man, it's going to be Mar. Sorry. It's a woman. This is a very formal way to start a sentence. A letter is Mar, meaning Mr., or Gveret, abbreviated there. Miss or Mrs. We don't have a difference in Hebrew between Ms., Miss, and Mrs. Hello. The shalom there is hello, but it's a nice way to do it. Instead of putting shalom at the beginning of it, you put it after their name. So, Mr. Smith, hello. And then you get into Biltzoni levakesh, blah, blah, blah. Same thing here. If you know their name. If you don't know their name, and it's, let's say, a whole group of people that you're just sending this to an office, for example. You don't know who's going to receive it. You would write Shalom Rav. Shalom Rav, shalom to all of you. Rav comes from the word rov, majority. So you sing it, shalom to all is the way you sing it. What?
Would you say lichvod?
Lichvod, you can, but lichvod isn't, you're not directly speaking to someone. It could mean that their secretary is getting it before them. When you address it directly to someone using shalom or shalom rav, you're speaking directly to them. But lichvod is another way to do it. This is a little bit more direct, though.
Is lichvod like dear sirs? Dear sirs.
No, lichvod is
Attention, isn't it?
Yeah, it's more like attention. Attention, so-and-so. It's not dear at all. Lichvod is very formal. It's very impersonal. If you want it to be more personal, right, like a personal letter, you would use the word yakar or yakara, depending on their gender. So if I was saying to Ali, if I was writing a letter to Ali, I would write Ali hayakara, my dear Ali, right? Dear, we use that a lot in English, but dear is a term of affection as much as it is addressing them.
When we use dear sirs, it's not a term of affection. It's very formal. It's dear sirs, you know.
All the more reason to understand language is not universal. So dear sir in English is a very different thing than how you would say it in Hebrew. It doesn't translate literally, but very important point. We got a few more questions here and then we're running out of time. Nechama, what is the difference between litkasher, letzaltzel, and letzalfen? Great question, really quick. Litkasher is to get in touch or to contact. Litzaltzel is to ring, as in a phone rings or a bell rings. Litalfen, the word is exactly in there. Litalfen comes from telephone. So to phone someone up is litalfen. Right, so to get in touch, to ring, or to phone.
Lichvod is used on envelopes. And
yes,
addressing
but
people.
again, it's not, yes, yes, exactly. Colin asks about transliteration. That's a great point. Let's get to that at another lesson because it's a bit more to get into. According to my daughter, you would use the term leharim to pick up. So arim tarim etzeh. Great. Brenda says if you want to use the verb leharim, which is to raise up, or to, in this case, to pick up to a child, that's great. No, Rona, that is, I hear what you're saying, but that's incorrect. If you are sending an email or a letter to an office, I need to send a letter to Misrad HaPnim to get an inquiry about a visa status. I don't have an actual person at Misrad HaPnim I'm talking to. I'm talking to their entire office. I would write Shalom Rav, colon, that is showing a lot of respect to whomever picks this up, right? It's the equivalent of, we have a way of saying to whom it may concern in Hebrew. This is another way to say it, shalom rav. Shalom to all of you, hello to all of you. It's a really good way to say it. Okay, with that, we do need to break for today. Again, thank you all for joining. If you have any requests for specific topics to cover, please be in touch with Nefesh B'Nefesh by email. We'll be happy to do it. And happy to have you on the call here and for next week as well. And with that, Toda Rabba, thank you very much, and Lehitoot. See you all.
Rav,
Thank
toda-
you so much.